I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Gloria Treaster. I have been in healthcare for 35 years or more, I'm not saying. And I am a board certified holistic health practitioner and coach, among other things. I think the way I'd like to present myself today is that I consider myself a student and a teacher. I love to learn and then share that information with everyone else, and particularly about health and well-being. I can't get enough. I don't know why. It's just who I am. So that being said, I also want to mention that I just submitted my manuscript to my publisher for a book that's coming out called Wellness 101, Your Empowerment Guide to Healthy Living. And so look for that. I'll probably be reaching out to all of you when it's ready for sale. And I'd also like to introduce my colleague, my friend, my advisor, and my mentor, Dr. Tammy Gutierrez, who is a board certified family medicine doctor with advanced training in functional medicine. Over her career, she has worked in a variety of settings, including both urban and rural health clinics, as well as teaching medical students and residents at the Ohio State University School of Medicine. She's passionate about using her more than 2 decades of clinical experience and her own personal health journey as a cancer survivor to empower people to their own true path of wellness. She is going to help you understand the medical perspective for the importance of a root cause functional medicine approach to achieving optimal health and well-being. So for those of you who aren't familiar with functional medicine, I just want to give you a brief explanation. So if you look at allopathic medicine, which is what I call conventional, some people call it traditional, I don't. Traditional is the old stuff, the good stuff. But allopathic medicine means treating people with drugs and or surgery. That's what most doctors are trained to do. And the approach from that perspective is a top-down approach. You have a symptom, let's get rid of the symptom. And that's what keeps happening. It's almost like just pushing it back down rather than using a functional medicine root cause approach, which would be more like you have a symptom. Why do you have that symptom? Where is it coming from? What is the root cause? And going way down deep and figuring out why is this happening. And so today we're going to present weight loss from a root cause perspective. Weight is not simply an arithmetic. It's not calories in versus calories out, or eating less food and exercising. Those things are important, don't get me wrong. But what if your biochemistry isn't working properly? Your adrenals aren't working, your thyroid's not working, your hormones are going crazy, you have food allergies, there's toxic chemicals in your body. There are other perspectives from which we can look at weight loss, and that's what we're going to teach today. Now, today we're going to try, our goal for you is to broaden the conversation about calories only. We want you to leave today feeling empowered that you're listening to your body, that you're allied with your body. And we want to open your eyes to possible routes to getting rid of this constant problem, this ongoing problem that so many of us struggle with, especially as we age. We're hoping today you walk away with a good understanding of that. And for some of you, that may be enough to get you started on a path. If you're looking for more, at the end, we'll tell you what we've been working on. We have a course that we want to tell you about, that 4-week course, and we'll tell you more about that later on. So I hope you stay till the end so we can share that with you. So I guess, Tammy, it's up to you. Take it away.
All right. So I'm so excited. As Gloria mentioned, I have been working with patients for a long time, and weight is not a new issue. But I really want to reframe the way we just even think about symptoms. And so I'm going to take a tiny second to say, I'm going to use my cancer as an example. So cancer is also a huge problem that has many facets and lots of contributing factors. But what I learned from my own cancer journey was to recognize that that cancer process, having cancer in the first place, was really a wake-up call. It was my body telling me that there were things that were not in balance and that were not okay and that hadn't been okay for a while in my body and in my life that needed to be addressed, right? It wasn't as simple as getting surgery for the cancer or treatment for the cancer. It was much bigger than that. I needed to rethink where that cancer came from and learn that I was not taking care of me as a whole in the way that I needed to. And now I view my cancer process as a gift. Like I opened my eyes to a whole different way of being and living and existing within my body and within the world at large. And that is what I think we need to do. So if whatever your symptom or your struggle is, if it's weight loss, take a minute today with us and rethink about this, right? It's not just like, oh, it's just this annoying weight and my body is being so frustrating and why won't it just do what I want it to do? It's actually maybe like that dashboard in your car, a warning light that something is not okay. And you need to find that something and get it addressed, or some things, right? I will tell you, I didn't get cancer because of one little tiny facet of my life. It was multifactorial. And I think for many people, weight is also a multifactorial, multiple lights pinging you on that dashboard saying, hey, you need to look at this and you need to address those things. And then the dashboard light goes away, right? The light itself is not the problem. And the weight may not be the problem. And so that's the lens I want to bring to our conversation today. So what kinds of things could this weight-based dashboard light actually mean for you? Gloria ran through a number of them. And so I want to start, like pretty much all functional doctors do, in the gut. Right? The gut is where we interface with the world the most. We tend to pay more attention to things that we see or hear, but actually the biggest interaction with the world around you is through your gut. It's this huge surface area and it is so complex. It's not just a tube of transport, and the food you eat is so much more than just calories or even vitamins and minerals. Right? The food you eat is messaging. It is sending memos to your body. It is telling you things. And many times, those messages that we send are not as friendly and loving as maybe they could be, right? And as a result, then the body starts sending some negative messages back. So one really common area that weight gain can represent is that your gut is not healthy, right? That your gut is feeling attacked or inflamed. And sometimes it's as simple as a food sensitivity or a food allergy. So I'm going to start there because that's the easy stuff. Food allergies, everybody knows about, right? You know, if you're allergic to peanuts, you eat a peanut, or sometimes you just touch a peanut and you swell up. Most of the time, you know if you have this problem because they happen quickly and they happen impressively. And so food allergies are actually only a tiny part of the problem for most people, because again, if you have that, you already know you have it. But food sensitivities are actually much more subtle, and lots of people have these and just don't realize they're there. I was one of them. One of the parts of healing my cancer was learning that I had food sensitivities to dairy and gluten and animal products. And so I had to remove those things in order to allow my body to heal, right? And food sensitivities happen because we get sick and it disrupts our gut, and then proteins get in, or we are stressed and our stress hormones disrupt our gut lining, and then food proteins get in undigested. And that antiviral part of our immune system that lines our intestinal tract sees those proteins and says, oh no, that's an intact protein. That must be a virus. I'm going to put up a wanted poster and say, this is an attacker, and we all need to go on a rampage and get rid of it. And one of the things our body does, anytime we feel attacked is it mounts that internal fight or flight response, which comes with adrenaline, but then it also comes with cortisol. And cortisol says, oh no, if we're under constant attack, we must be in danger of starvation. Because for most of human history, constant ongoing daily attack meant famine, natural disaster, war, right? Times of calorie restriction. The people in Haiti are living this right now, right? They've had actually almost all of those in the past 12 months, right? They've had political upheaval, they've had a hurricane, and they have had an earthquake. And so they are surviving on 600 to 800 calories a day, and they have to not starve to death. So our internal response to chronic stress or inflammation or attack is actually to assume we are in danger of starvation. And so our body goes into hoarding mode, right? Just like at the beginning of the pandemic when people were hoarding toilet paper because they were afraid that it wasn't going to be available. And your body starts hoarding calories and it hangs on to those calories and won't let them go, right? And so at the beginning of the pandemic, in addition to trying to buy more toilet paper, you also may have tried to use less toilet paper, right? In order to not run out as fast because you just weren't sure if it was going to be available again soon. And your body does all of that. It tries to spend fewer calories and get more efficient and lower your metabolic rate. It tries to pull more calories out of your food, and it tries to lock them up and stick them away for the future. And what you're left with then is extra weight. But if you respond to that extra weight by actually trying to go on a diet where you restrict calories, you actually tell the body it was right, that you were in danger of starvation, that calories were not readily available, and you actually reinforce that hoarding chemistry that you already had going on. You might temporarily actually drop your weight for a short time, but your body will just tighten up its hoarding behaviors and actually overcome that. And most people find that after they go on a really restrictive calorie process, that then they actually rebound their weight, and often they go even higher than they were before they started that diet. And that's what's happening. Right? If you actually run out of toilet paper or get close to it, then the next time it's available, you buy all of it. And you're even less rational about this idea of there being a toilet paper shortage. Even if everyone's telling you it's fine, the shortage is over, having lived through that experience means you're like, I'm not so sure. I think I'd like to have an extra 27 rolls, right? And so I want you to stop hoarding calories, right? And I want you to recognize the answer to that person who's stashing toilet paper just about everywhere, which I will admit my husband was one of those people. I still am finding toilet paper in really random places in my house. But anyhow, I want you, instead of just focusing on the toilet paper, I want you to get to a point where you feel like the whole threat is resolved. Because if you resolve the reason that your body thinks a shortage could happen, then it doesn't have to feel anxious enough to try to go into those hoarding behaviors in the first place, right? And so we talked briefly about that food sensitivity as a possibility, but I really want to dive into all those other types of threats that people might be experiencing, just to give you an idea of the vast array of things that can be in the background. That food sensitivity piece, super, super common. I would actually tell you that probably 80% of Americans have at least one food sensitivity, because we are constantly eating crap in this country and living a high stress, low sleep, exercise deficient lifestyle. And so all the things that would protect our gut are low, and all the things that would damage our gut are high. And so sooner or later, some of those undigested proteins are going to trigger an immune response, and you're going to develop at least a low-grade food sensitivity. So almost across the board, there's at least a component of that that's adding to that sense of, uh-oh, maybe I need to start hoarding, right? Maybe I need to start hanging on to this. And I mentioned that that's not the only thing that can happen in your gut. We also bombard our microbiome. Our microbiome is that unbelievable community, that entire ecosystem of friends that we have living inside our gut that actually perform a ton of health functions for us in the background. I often describe them to people as all of the workers in your community that do the things that make your life flow that you never meet. So the people who sort the mail at the post office, and the people who turn the lights on at the electric company, and the people who turn the gas on at the natural gas company, and the people who maintain those lines, and the people who pick up your trash, and the people who plow the snow on your streets or sweep the leaves off. Right? Most of us never know who those people are. We never see them. They're just behind the scenes. But if they all disappeared tomorrow or went on strike, we would be really sad, right? There are so many things that wouldn't happen the way they should. And that's what your microbiome is doing. It's like your entire city infrastructure happening inside your gut. And it's supposed to be diverse. You are supposed to have more microbes inside you than there are people on this entire planet. So you have an entire planetary ecosystem in your body if everything is healthy and well. But we have so many chemicals coming at us all the time that actually kill these guys off. And we don't eat a really rich diversity of plants and fermented foods anymore, the way indigenous peoples have for millennia. And so we don't constantly put it back the way people used to. And so as a result, that microbiome can get tipped. Sometimes it's just deficient and sometimes it's just skewed, right? And less friendly things have moved in and taken up space. And what that ends up doing is twofold. One is it actually triggers that sense of being under attack, right? If your house was filling up with garbage because the people at the garbage company were not coming anymore to pick it up, you might start feeling kind of threatened in your own space. And so those same hoarding, fight or flight, anti-starvation mechanisms start kicking in. But the metabolism part of it is also there. Many of those good guys actually send messages to your brain on a daily basis about whether you need more energy or more nutrients. And so when they aren't there to have those friendly conversations, your brain feels deficient and it says, well, I must need more nutrients because I'm not getting those messages that I'm good, right? I must need more toilet paper because people are telling me that there's not enough of what they're looking for when they go to find it, right? And so we want to make sure that your microbiome is healthy and strong and robust, because that might actually be what's going on with your weight. There's fascinating studies that actually took rats. Unfortunately, we do bad things to rats, but they took rats and they genetically modified them to make them obese so that they could study diabetes. And so they created these obese rats. But then somebody came along and they said, what would happen if we look at the microbiome of these rats? So the original insult that supposedly made them gain weight was actually a genetic change, right, in the rat itself. But what they actually experimented is they took stool from genetically normal mice that were skinny, and they took the stool and they put it inside the obese rats, and the obese rats got skinny. And they took stool from the obese rats and they put it in the skinny rats, and the skinny rats got fat. So even though the genetics didn't get changed, just altering the microbiome was sufficient to actually reverse the weight complications for each of those types of rats. right? So it shows us how powerful the microbiome is in creating that metabolic balance set point for us, right? And like I said, I will tell you, we do not support and love our microbiome, right? And so that is a big player for many of my patients also. Even outside the gut, right? And triggered by the gut, but not only by the gut, is that hormonal response that we have. So I mentioned stress multiple times so far in this conversation. And I feel like the past couple years have just been heaping that on as well. For most people, it's been a stressful time in some way or another. And so all that stress triggers an emotional ask for those hoarding hormones, right? So we feel under attack. It doesn't go away right away. So then we start pouring out cortisol. As a doctor in regular traditional medical school, where I was learning to give all kinds of prescriptions all the time, I mean, we learned fast that if you give people prednisone, if you give people basically the pill version of cortisol, weight gain happens almost instantly, right? I mean, it's one of the fastest ways you can put pounds on people. And that was always a side effect. It usually wasn't what we were trying to do when we gave people prednisone, but your own body is potentially putting this stuff out in mass quantities when you feel chronically inflamed or under attack. And again, that weight gain is the body's attempt to save you from starvation, right? Those people in Haiti need that high cortisol level because otherwise they would be starving to death. And so this isn't something your body is doing wrong. It's just that we are misapplying it, right? Our bodies are assuming something that's not true about the type of stress that's coming at us, right? It's assuming that this stress comes with not enough calories and lots of movement in order to just stay alive. And in fact, most Americans have found that it actually comes with more calories and less movement. And so we are out of alignment with all of that biochemical magic that is there to keep us alive. So those high stress levels raise our cortisol levels, help put us into hoarding mode and start filling all of our closets with metabolic toilet paper that we then have to figure out what to do with and how to get rid of when we don't really need it. It doesn't stop there, right? So in addition to not wanting to starve to death, people who are undergoing famine should also not have babies, right? That would be a really bad time to get pregnant. So another hormonal secondary piece that comes from chronic stress and other chronic inflammation is that our other hormones start shifting in order to protect us. Our thyroid hormone levels get blocked or come down in order to decrease our metabolism and spend less toilet paper, right? Spend less calories because we might not have them. And so our thyroid levels fall. And our female and male sex hormones fall, which means our muscle mass production and regulation and maintenance gets affected. Our moods get affected. Our energy gets affected. All of those things have really solid reasons to exist, but they contribute to problems with weight management, right? And they contribute to other manifestations of how we feel yucky when we are in these situations, even if it's just a low-grade, chronic, mild yucky that you aren't even fully aware of in your background every day, right? And so all those other hormone cascades can get disrupted. And sometimes even when we then go back and try to fix the original stressor or it goes away, it doesn't always automatically just tip right back into balance if it's been out of whack for a while. And so people's thyroid may need help to come back. People's sex hormones may need help to come back and to get into a place of function again. And all of those different imbalances have consequences on our metabolism and on our weight levels. There are two other pieces I want to mention. And the first one is toxins. And so I've talked a little bit about how toxins affect our microbiome, but toxins also directly impact a number of our organs, including our hormone producing organs. And so if you're exposed to mercury in your teeth or in a ton of fish that you're eating, or if you're exposed to tons of Roundup, or you're exposed to mold in your house, or you're exposed to these things, not only are you triggering a defensive hoarding response because your body feels it's being poisoned, but you are also directly impacting many of those same hormone organs that I just listed. Right. And so one of you actually, is trying to make clean cosmetics. For many women, they have no idea how many toxins are in the sunscreens and personal care products and cosmetic stuff that we put on all the time. Like there is lead in most lipsticks, people just don't even realize how extensive our exposures are to all of these things. And so sometimes there's also a toxic component in the background that your body feels like, wow, life is threatening. I want extra toilet paper. I'm gonna hold on to some extra right now. And you look in the mirror and that's the part you see, right? That's the part that jumps out at you. You don't directly feel the impact of the heavy metals or other toxins that you're accumulating in your tissues. And then the last piece that I really want to talk about is also one of the biggest, and that's actually the metabolic shifts, right? Because so many of our lives have moved to sitting in front of a computer screen or sitting in a car or, really being much more sedentary. And so much of our food is packaged and processed and chemically altered from how our bodies are designed to handle it. We have a lot of metabolic inflammation, right? And when I say metabolic, that's from the medical term of that metabolic disease or inflammation is that whole cluster of diabetes and high blood pressure and high cholesterol and fatty liver, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and high triglycerides and vascular inflammation, right? One of the things we have in our country is an abundance of vascular inflammation. And that whole metabolic cascade is a mix and a byproduct of almost all the things we've mentioned: disruptions in our gut lining and our microbiome, toxic exposures, high cortisol levels, and all of that creates the opportunity for insulin resistance. And just like cortisol, another medicine I can give someone that just packs the pounds on is insulin, right? When I treat people for diabetes, historically, before I found functional medicine, right, eventually they would end up on insulin injections. And even though we know gaining weight is bad for diabetes, everybody on insulin gains weight because insulin is a storage hormone. Insulin is literally that worker that's shelving things, right? And it doesn't take things off the shelf ever. Insulin says, onto the shelf with you. That's it. It doesn't allow you to take it back off. Insulin is for storage. And when insulin is low, then you could potentially take things off. But when we have all these other layers and we get really insulin resistant, insulin is never low. And when insulin is never low, then you never get to unpack those shelves. And so what I really find in so many of my patients is that those insulin levels are one of the biggest blockades to actually dropping pounds, no matter how hard they work on diet, exercise, or even stress management. Right? And so what we need to do in many cases is actually directly target that insulin resistance in an effective and manageable way so that you stop locking the cupboards and you can get those calories and those fat cells to open back up again and become available to spend, which is what we would like to do when we want to lose weight. Okay. So that was a whole lot of information. And I sometimes think I overwhelm people at times because there's just so much. So I want to take a moment right now and check in with you guys and get a sense for what kinds of questions you have going on and whether you've heard some of this before, whether it makes more questions in your head than you started with, where are people right now with all of that?
Tammy, you want to maybe just do a little deeper dive into what insulin resistance really is, because it's not just for diabetics. It's everyone.
No, diabetes is end stage insulin resistance, right? And so actually there's amazing data that came out when I was very early in my medical career that really showed insulin resistance is the actual underlying problem, right? So diabetes, like I said, is an end stage manifestation of it. But you have an organ called a pancreas, and it sits right behind your stomach and in front of your spine, just under your rib cage. And it has a couple jobs. It helps you digest your food, but it also makes insulin. And insulin is the tool you use to put away glucose, which is everything that's a carbohydrate gets turned into glucose, and then you store glucose in a variety of forms. Your tissues, except your brain, cannot take glucose out of your blood unless you have insulin. It's like the key that opens up the cupboard and allows the sugar to go in and be used as fuel. And when people have too much glucose on a regular basis, or there are other triggers that are making them make too much insulin, then it's like gum getting stuck in those keyholes. And the body starts trying to block some of those keyholes because it feels overwhelmed. And so you end up in this constant thing where you put out insulin, but it doesn't do the job. And the pancreas senses that the sugar isn't getting put away fast enough. And so it makes more insulin. For those of us that have teenagers, it's kind of like your teenager sitting upstairs and turning on the music and you shouting, "Hey, that's too loud, turn it down." And the teenager saying, "I don't want to hear you shouting, so I'm going to turn it up." And you trying to shout even louder. And then they turn the music up louder. And then it keeps going until somebody can't overpower the other one anymore. And when you can't shout loud enough to be heard over the music, that's diabetes, right? When you can't put out enough extra insulin to actually put some of that sugar away, that is diabetes. And the sugar levels that are measurable in your blood start rising. Okay. And so that's why diabetes is the end stage. The music's been loud for a while. And the real problem is that resistance going on in the background. And there are lots of tools to try to target and reverse insulin resistance that are simple and easy to use. But so many times people aren't using them, and just cutting calories is not a direct insulin solution. Okay. Exercise does open, especially certain types of exercise, but exercise does open those cupboards without insulin for a short time. And so exercising right before you eat helps lower insulin resistance problems because it means you don't need insulin to put the sugar away in those situations, right? So that's just one example of a trick that people can use.
Right before you eat or right after you eat, right?
So, and after you eat, yes, although it's even more effective if you do it right before you eat, because that way, as your sugar is going in, the receptors are already triggered and the closets are open and things can just get put where they belong very, very quickly. But if you can't do it right before, then doing some exercise right after you eat helps you need less insulin. Your pancreas will have already put some out because it will have sensed the carbohydrates that you ate, but you can decrease the amount of insulin and the length of time that you need to put out insulin by going ahead and helping actually put those closet doors into the open position with the exercise. It's not actually about how many calories you're burning. It's really about using as many muscle groups as possible so that you open as many of your closet doors as possible and decrease the amount of insulin that you need in order to put sugar away.
Okay, you can start asking questions in the chat, but I'm going to just expand on one thing, or ask you to expand on one thing, which is the toxic load that we're all getting, especially from food and glyphosate, which I think we all need to talk about a little bit, and how the toxins affect weight. Does it hold on to the fat? Does it keep you from releasing the fat? What does that toxic load do?
Right. So I'm going to start with that part. What the toxic load in most instances does primarily is trigger a cortisol response, right? So if I poisoned you, of course you would have a fight or flight response, right? Like, I don't think that's actually all that difficult to wrap your head around. You would understand that if your body receives a chemical threat or attack, of course it's going to mount its defense system. And anytime that attack is ongoing, right, lasting more than 15 or 20 minutes, then in addition to the adrenaline, you're going to also chase that adrenaline with cortisol. And cortisol is amazingly effective at all the things I talked about. It hurts your gut, it lowers your metabolism, it shifts your other hormones in a negative direction, and it tells you to hoard calories. And so I think the primary weight effect for most toxins is actually a cortisol release that is frequent and ongoing. But the second piece for many of those toxins, like actually most pesticides, are endocrine disruptors on purpose, right? Because that's what you're trying to do. You're actually trying to disrupt the endocrine function of the pests that you're trying to kill. And so that is how they work. And so then you're bigger than those little tiny insects or microorganisms that they were trying to kill off on the crops. However, you also eat a whole lot more of it. And over time it accumulates. And many of those chemicals are fat soluble, which means you actually store them in your fat cells. And then they stay there and they continue to basically exude trauma to your system. And many of your hormones are made from fat. And so those fat soluble toxins are pulled into those endocrine organs, especially, and they do a ton of harm there. And so they make your thyroid not work as well, and they make your pancreas not work as well, and they make your adrenal glands not work as well, and they make your ovaries or testicles not work as well. And the other place we store a ton of fat that gets hit hard by these fat soluble toxins is the brain. And so we have tons of fat acting as insulation and cell lining in the brain. And so we actually preferentially are storing toxins in the brain in many cases. And so it can also impact some hormone dysfunction up there in the regulatory mechanisms on our hormones, and also just make us feel much more under attack. And contribute to all kinds of inflammation and disease from a neurologic standpoint also. Glyphosate, that one you mentioned, Roundup, right, is so widespread, and you are getting exposed to Roundup every day, whether you want it or not. They did a really brilliant study in California where they looked at people across a whole spectrum of different diets and different work exposures and different things. They brought in about 1,000 people and they asked them whether they were eating organic or not organic. And they asked them what they did for a living and all these other things. And they discovered when they checked their pee, every single person had Roundup in their urine that day, everybody. And people who ate organic had a lot less Roundup than the people who didn't. But we have dumped so much Roundup on the planet that every one of us has Roundup exposure every single day, because it's in our water supply and it's in our rain. And so, you can't fully avoid it. You can do things to mitigate it, and you can obviously decrease your dose, because the dose often makes the poison, right? And so obviously having much less of it, which the people who ate organic and were mindful about these things definitely had less. But the reality is we as a society have to come together and decide we would like to change this, and we would like to stop dumping unbelievable quantities of Roundup on the planet, because it stays. You can actually test all the produce at the grocery store today and still find DDT, which was banned, I think, shortly before I was born. And that's been a while. So, these things don't disappear instantly just because you stop using them. They stay in the environment. And it is crazy now how much more toxic load you get from a single vegetable or fruit than you got when I was a child, which is a part of why we are seeing an acceleration of diabetes, of autism, of, so many inflammatory conditions, because even if we try to feed our children relatively clean, clean is not as clean as it was 40 years ago, right? It's just a cumulative burden on the planet. Sorry, that one does not sound super fun and exciting. I understand, but there are tools that you can use to help dump that regularly, right? If you make more trash, then you just have to take the trash out more often. And so it's not total gloom and doom, but I think awareness is important.
Yeah, that's something that will be further down the road in our collaboration. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, but our collaboration is called Get Well With Us. And that's what we want you to all do. We want to share as much information. I didn't say this earlier, but Dr. G is in a private practice, but she can't touch as many people as she would like to. And that's why we're trying this year to create these little mini courses so that she can share the information that her private patients get one-on-one through some kind of an interactive course. And so we've worked really hard to kind of bring that in, and detox and toxins is a really important topic because there are toxic assaults coming at us so many ways: the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the products we use, things that we put on our bodies, in our bodies. And so, and they impact weight. And that's why we're talking about it today. But we think it's also important to learn how to avoid them and also how to get them out of your body. I personally had an episode of literally passing out on my computer at 4 o'clock every day. I couldn't stay up. I just fell over and got tested, and I had toxic overload in lead. That was surprising. Yeah, my lipstick. This is organic, but yeah, lead is there. It maybe when I was growing up, it was in the paint on the wall. I live in a house that was built in the 50s. You know, who knows where it came from, but I had it. And I had to go through a process to get rid of it. Now I feel much better. So I think a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of those things are also impacted. And the best thing that we can do right now is to avoid them, and also vote with your dollars. Don't buy those crappy products. And if we don't buy them, maybe they'll stop making them because no one will be making them money using them. So that's my little thing there.
Yeah. And I also, just because I'm wondering if part of what's going on right now is everybody's just sitting there going like, oh my goodness, this was a ton, and I don't even know where I would start. And so I just want to take a second and say, how would you even use all of this information that I just sort of threw out there? So even though we're all impacted by a lot of these different things, most of us have, you know, one or two that are very dominant for you at this moment, right? Both our genetic predispositions and our environment really shape which of these things might be most prevalent for any given person and most important for any given person. And so there are really very simple strategies that can be used to address this. Again, I'll use myself as an example. When I was diagnosed with this very stupidly rare form of vascular cancer in my early 30s, I was baffled and mad because I felt like, wait, I eat pretty well, I exercise, I take good care of myself, I don't drink, I never smoked, I've never put in a whole bunch of obvious poisons. Why do I have cancer? It just felt very wrong. And what I came to realize is I was not going to bed. I have a career that interrupts my sleep. I have children that interrupt my sleep. I hadn't really slept in a very long time, and I wasn't doing a good job of managing my stress. And so for me, it was targeting those two things very powerfully that I needed to learn and I needed to do in order to allow my immune system to function. But as part of my healing process, I also discovered I had a huge component of food sensitivities. And so when I went on an anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory diet and was green juicing, not diet like count your calories, right? But just changing and removing things that might be feeding the cancer cells more than they were feeding me, what I discovered was, holy cow, I feel better than I have felt maybe ever, right? Over the following year, my seasonal allergies went away. I didn't care. I would have happily taken Flonase for the rest of my life, as long as the rest of my life was going to be more than 3 to 5 years long. And so I really discovered that this was a powerful piece of my health transformation, right? And I felt fantastic, right? And I wasn't deprived, right? I had to learn to eat a little bit differently, but my treatment of my food sensitivities underlying not only helped heal the cancer, it totally radically shifted my whole life experience. And I have more energy to share, and I have more, just more freedom from having to take allergy pills or nose sprays or these other things. Like, I just live a completely different world than I did before I found this. And I'm so grateful to the cancer for opening my eyes to some of those things. And this is what I think can happen for you. It may be your weight that kind of brings you to the table and discovers for you what the particular triggers or problems might be in your health that then you need to tackle or resolve. Right. And so that's what is possible. And that's what I would love to see happen. So one person asked, how do you know if you have food sensitivities? And so there's lots and lots of different ways they can manifest. But, one thing that I will say, not just me, right, but many people with food sensitivities, because it's your antiviral system that's actually getting revved up, you'll have many of the same kinds of symptoms that you might get from a virus. So I had seasonal allergies. Some people get rash or eczema symptoms, right? People with allergies, eczema, and asthma, almost all, if not all, have food sensitivities, right? No one I've ever treated for those things has been free of at least some food sensitivities, okay? Because they're manifesting that antiviral inflammatory response, right? So it doesn't always have to manifest in that sort of respiratory lining. It can also manifest with, irritable bowel type symptoms or heartburn type symptoms, right? It can manifest again with skin things. I'll be honest, right? My 15-year-old has acne when she eats the foods that are triggers for her. And so I don't have to enforce her diet anymore because her face does it for me. And so she hears very clearly in the mirror when she's eaten something that is inflammatory for her. And so skin is another place where we often express that inflammation that we would see from food sensitivities. And so those types of symptom clusters really always initiate in me a recommendation like, wow, you sound like you might have food sensitivities. We should start there. Right? If you know that sometimes I eat these certain foods and then I don't feel as good afterwards, that's another clue, right? I mean, if you've already made the connection that certain foods really seem to bother you, then obviously that's another clue. And again, it doesn't always have to be gut or mucosa or skin like our surfaces. Some food sensitivities manifest with joint pain or manifest with trouble sleeping or brain fog. And so it's a little harder because there's so many causes for those things, but those can also be clues. Sometimes when I'm treating people for depression or anxiety, when we change their diet, they don't need those medicines that they were taking when they came to me anymore because they're not actually anxious anymore, right? They were anxious because they kept putting in something that their body felt was a threat. And so it kept pouring out adrenaline, right? If I gave you espresso every couple hours all day long, like you might feel a little jittery and anxious too. And so those clues are very helpful. And the question was, do you have to remove them forever? And so the answer to that is usually not, right? Is usually not. Just like your body can respond to a virus and then kind of calm it back down, your body can heal. But what you have to do is you have to repair the fences in your gut. And so most of us have heard that term leaky gut now, right? And what that really means is that there are gaps in between the cells, and sometimes just actual whole cells that have been damaged so much they can no longer act as part of the fence. And just like the fence in your garden keeps out the rodents that might rip up your crops, or keeps out the neighbor's dog that's going to dig up your plants, those leaks allow undigested food proteins to get into that underneath layer where your immune system surveillance lives. And so if you can heal the fence, then it's okay if your neighbor has a dog and lets it run loose, right? Then it can't get in and rip up your plants anymore. So you have to heal the fence, and you have to keep it healed. You may always have to be cautious if something has suddenly disrupted your fence, right? So for example, I don't have to be as cautious with everything that I'm sensitive to. There are a couple foods that for me are just really inflammatory, and I just stay away from them forever. But many foods that I used to react to, I can tolerate fine now without an issue. But if I were to say catch a cold where my immune system was ramped up and my gut was not feeling good, I would avoid all those foods until I felt like my fence was put back together, right? I wouldn't leave that fence open while the dog was out running around, okay?
Yeah. I would like to add to what you're saying in regard to that question. Something you should know too about food sensitivities is that, as Dr. G mentioned earlier, some of them are immediate. You eat a peanut, you have anaphylactic shock, you could die.
Allergy. That's
allergy. Sorry. If you have a sensitivity though, you could eat a food on Monday and not have a reaction until Wednesday. So it's kind of hard to connect the two. And so therefore, sometimes it's difficult to pin it down. If it gets to the point where you really need to figure this out, one way is to do an elimination diet and stop eating that food. I believe it's 21 days, Dr. G.
Yeah.
And then you can start adding it back and start seeing. Another symptom you will get is headaches, which you might not tie to a food 3 days after you ate it. So that's something to think about. If it's really bad and no one can figure it out and you've tried the elimination diet, you can get tested. It's a simple test. You can do a finger stick. You put drops of blood on a little card, you mail it into the lab, and you can pay for getting 98 foods, 144 foods, 208, whatever you want, whatever your budget will allow. And then you can see the levels at which you are sensitive to those foods. So just wanted to tie that up a little bit with that.
Yeah. And I also, again, want to just say one other personal story. Because I didn't know all of my food sensitivities with my last pregnancy and how significant they were, I actually added back in some of the things I had been avoiding for my cancer that were significant sensitivities for me while I was pregnant with my youngest child. So I kind of bathed her in my food sensitivity reaction the entire pregnancy. So she came out with 12 food group sensitivities and couldn't eat hardly anything. And we had a disaster first 5 months trying to get her gut healed and calmed down. She is 6 now, and she can eat pretty much all of those things. I have not reintroduced gluten and dairy because those are things we just don't do in our house anymore for a number of us, but she might be fine with them. I actually don't know, but she's healed all of her food sensitivities. She eats them on a regular basis and she does not have any problems with them. And so it definitely isn't a forever thing. That testing was not something I knew about. I would have jumped at it at the time I was trying to figure out what I could possibly eat while I was breastfeeding her. But you can do it without the testing, or you can sometimes speed things up if it just feels overwhelming and you can bite the bullet and do the testing. Both are possible. I have done both.
We also,
so just know that. Yeah.
We also, we were going to tell you at the end about our class. I just wanted you to know that we are doing this class and we will send you a link to sign up for it. And I'm going to put it in the chat. But I brought it up at this moment because after the 4 weeks, if people really want to know more about their biochemistry, Dr. G and I put together a weight loss lab testing panel that we got a great price on, and we're really excited about it. And so we're going to take it even a step further. So what we really want you to do is empower you to take charge of all of these little pieces and parts and making sure that your biochemistry is working in good concert with each other. everything's working together. All those little people you talked about, the street cleaner and
Yeah.
everybody, they're all
Yeah.
communicating and they all like each other and everything's working well. But at the end of that, some people might need more information to really get to that root cause we talked about at the beginning. And so I just want you to know that there is a progression that will take you through so that we can kind of figure out exactly what it is for you. Because the bottom line is functional medicine appreciates the fact that each and every one of us is biochemically unique. You have your gene pool that you bring into the world with you, but whether or not those genes get expressed, about 80% of the time, it's more dependent on your epigenetics, which is your environment. What are you eating? What are you doing? Where do you live? And what's going on in your life that impacts whether or not those genes express themselves or flourish. You may have a gene to be a certain way, but whether or not you get that depends on your lifestyle, very much so. So we want to lead you through how do you live this lifestyle that helps you not get all the bad stuff in your gene pool and flourish and really live your best life, because so many of us are struggling. There's so many assaults on us all the time with the stress and the bad food and the bad products and just the things that happen to us, that we kind of want to make you aware of where to look for them and what to do to combat them, like detoxing. I see we have a question about.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, I want to make sure I tackle those two questions really quickly. So one of the questions was, you know, do you have to do IV therapy to detox? And the answer is absolutely not. I'll tell you that even in my patients who are totally toxic, I don't use IV therapy. I mean, maybe one or two of my entire practice of patients that have had to detox have I sent them to try to go get IV therapy. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's also a COVID risk right now. But even pre-COVID, I wasn't really using it because detoxification is, some people go nuts and throw the whole like shotgun at it. But I will tell you that then you potentially unlock so many toxins and pull them all into your system really quickly. You can get really sick. I mean, you can land in the hospital. And so I don't go that route, right? When I help people detox, we do it one closet at a time and in a very manageable way. And usually we start with things like food, and we start with binders, and we start with, you know, other green juice and other cleanses. Like there's so many ways that you can do your own detox at your own pace in your house. And there's, you know, there are supplements and other things that we can add, but absolutely IV therapy is not necessary. And at least for me, that's not my approach, right? I don't try to just cut it off. I try to help you heal it so that you can manage it, because most of us need to keep living our lives while we're doing our treatments. And then another question was about exercise, right? And you can definitely push your body too far and feel poorly, especially if your mitochondria are unhealthy. And we didn't even talk about mitochondria today, but many people who push too far too fast find out they have mitochondrial problems, and then they're stuck laying on the couch for hours trying to recover from that exercise. And so you can actually trigger another inflammatory response if you're overdoing what your body has the energy for. So just like food changes, you have to make the changes that work for you, right? This is like the toothpaste aisle. There are lots of choices, and sometimes it's overwhelming. And so this is what we want to do, is create some resources to help people figure out, like, oh my goodness, I've seen 12 different people telling me that their exercise is the best. How do I know what's the best exercise for me? And I feel like the answer is to first identify what are your problems, right? Like based on your symptoms, based on your environment, based on your genetics, what are the things that are most likely my problems? And so then what are the solutions that often work well for those root causes? And start there. And that works for food, that works for exercise, that works for sleep recommendations, like so many different things. But the reality is, how do I distill all that knowledge, all that decision-making into a format that then patients can access? And so that's what we are trying to put together in that 4-week class. The first week is teaching you how to literally do that self-assessment. And there's online questionnaires and and a live session at the beginning to review some of it and answer questions and really help people diagnose, okay, do I have insulin resistance? What labs have I done already with my doctor that might tell me that? What clues in my physical body might tell me that? What can I experiment with this week to discover if that seems possible for me? What are the signs of microbiome dysfunction? How would I know? Right? And so there we go. So anyway, these things are complicated, and they will take a week, for people to kind of work through and sort out. But then hopefully at the end of that week, they come away with it saying, okay, these are probably my top 1 or 2 things. And then the second week is about how do you eat for each of these things, right? What kinds of food approaches might help insulin resistance? What kinds of food approaches might help feed my microbiome? What kinds of food approaches help me gently start detoxifying my system so that I can turn this around, right? And how do I do this and have it taste good and not cost $700 a day, right? Because most of us don't have a personal chef. So, how do you do this in real life, in real time? And then the third week is about how to use movement, how to choose between all those exercises, and how to tailor it, again, to what the root causes are for you and the lifestyle and budget limitations that you have. Because here again, not all of us can afford a personal trainer. So how do you do this for yourself in your own house without a ton of extra money and without a ton of extra equipment? And then the last week is about how do you take what you've learned and build a sustainable way of living. I don't want anybody to just go on a diet. I don't want to ship people, meals in a jug that they eat for breakfast for a month. And then at the end of that month, they've lost 10 pounds, but then they haven't learned to change their life. So they either have to drink those shakes for breakfast forever, or they go right back to where they started, right? And so I want people to learn how to live and eat and move and breathe and sleep well and feel their best. And that's what I'm trying to kind of accomplish with all of this. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, we've got a link in the chat and also a code to get $100 off. Since you were kind enough to spend an hour with us this morning. We appreciate that. One thing we didn't cover too heavily, which will be in the course, but I just wanted to ask about hormones. One last question about why is it that as you age, you tend to store more belly fat?
So lots of reasons. A, you've accumulated way more toxins. B, the odds of you accumulating insulin resistance is higher by then. And also your microbiome, right? Your utility workers have been undergoing trauma for a long period of time. And so, odds are good. Plus life itself in our country, unless you have a manual labor job, often comes with less and less and less exercise over time. And so almost every single one of those things, you've had more time to accumulate food sensitivities. You've had more time to get sedentary and decrease your muscle mass. And just all those things, right? And so I think that age doesn't have to play in. You can have some of that stuff at the age of 10, but your risk of accumulating them increases the longer you're here, right?
Any other questions from the group?
Well, there were a couple about the course itself. And so one of them was about whether you have to come to those live sessions. And so it's a one hour a week is live for people who want it. And it is Saturday morning. To help make it available to people who have work or who have children or who have other things. But anyhow, that is recorded and it is available. So for people that couldn't make it, that would still be there. And then I think there was another question.
Well, also, Dr. G, we've got a lot of material that we'll be sharing, and we're creating a community so that through the course, you can meet other people who are going through similar things. There'll be chat available. You'll be able to get support. And the other thing that we didn't mention is that if the best way to do something like this is a buddy. get a buddy. See if you can find someone who will do this with you so you could talk about it. If you don't, you'll still have the community that we've put together. But if you want to do this with a friend, email me at getwellwithus@gmail, and I'll give you a special code for even a deeper discount on the class, because we want to get as many people involved in this as we can.
Yeah, and then the other thing was about a cost list for the additional testing. Absolutely, we would put that in there. Many of those things are sometimes already done. Like this is the piece that we'll talk about. And the reason that we're not telling everybody to get labs done in that first 4 weeks is that, you know, like I said before, I found all of my food sensitivities without ever testing them, right? I took care of my problems by actually looking at what I already knew about myself and applying it to help with what was going on. And so I have just discovered that many patients don't have to put out a ton of extra money on lab tests, that many, many times you and your body can have that conversation and get the answers that you need very quickly. And so 100% we will tell you. And it's not like, I feel like the normal blood panel that she talked about, was it like 120 something, I think, Gloria?
It was like 115, 120. I can't say exactly, but it's in that range, and it was great.
Exactly. So anyhow, you know, that was the basic, that's that basic weight loss panel through Ulta Labs that we created. But, you know, food sensitivity testing, if people do it, is more expensive than that through something like US Biotech, although it depends on how big a panel you want. But again, I don't necessarily encourage people to spend that money at the beginning. I encourage people to first start off by actually listening. And many, many times your body will give you the answers. Okay. Many, many times. And so you just have to have that little secret decoder ring to figure out what it means, right? Like, what does it mean that I have eczema, right? What does that mean? And so that's the part that I tend to tell people to start with. Okay. Did I miss any questions? Hang on.
Yeah,
oh, okay, good. So there was a question about the link, but it sounds like there was a period at the end of the link, and now the link works. All right. Thank you guys for.
Oh, wow. Okay. Didn't mean to do that.
Thank you guys for doing the little test and trial for us as far as the logistical side of things. Gloria and I have spent so many years trying to work on health. And I just have to tell you, it's been very humbling to realize that now I also have to be an IT guru.
Oh my God.
That is not where my training or my passion lies. But I also recognize that it's a tool, right? And that it has the power to just take the medical stuff and help it be accessed by so many more people that it is worth it. But I will apologize ahead of time for the fact that, you know, I am way better at fixing people than I am at fixing computer stuff. So please let us know when the computer stuff needs help, and we will make sure we get it to you.
Yep, we're learning as we go.
We are.
By the end of the year, we'll be pros at this. It'll be awesome.
That's right.
Yeah. So you guys are our first, and very excited that you're all here. And we have a group from LinkedIn as well. And we're going to be reaching out to all of you afterwards with an email and a link to the recording. Please share it. We'd love to have you share it. The more, the merrier. We just want to spread the good message of good health. So many people, I mean, think about it, 67%, and it could be higher now, of Americans are either overweight or obese. And if you think about weight, not in how I look in that gorgeous dress or that cool pair of jeans, think about it more as that's the basis for you being sick, for your life, for getting diseases, for not being well. And who wants that? You know, you want to feel good. Listen, you know, there's so many other assaults coming at us. It's good if your body is in harmony with itself, and that you learn to listen to your body, because that's one thing that we don't do. And I think Dr. G is always saying, you know, it's like that blinking light on your dashboard, you know, and it just keeps getting louder and louder, and you're not listening. So we want to teach you how to tune in to WYOU, station WYOU, right? We're going to send you that.
And that's going to come in your email, and we're going to send you that last little thing to just Really take that as your number one message, which is that you have the power to change your health and that you and your body are a team, and that your weight struggle needs to be rethought of as your body telling you that it needs some extra love and attention in some important way. And so you guys can work together to solve that. And then the pounds will take care of themselves.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This was such a pleasure to be with you this morning. We appreciate you giving us a little bit of your Saturday, and we hope to see you all in the class. Thank you very much.